Good morning, everybody. This is Paul Cramey. Welcome to our first of the two sessions. Um, Today, we're going to talk about selection lists and dynamic links and filters. Look at what they are, how to add a category, part category, how to add a part, how to set up the filters, and then we'll learn how the material part lists and selection lists, how they work together, and can using parts or just a link. And then we'll look at an example or two, both at the beginning and at the end, to see the influence of the selection list. On Thursday, it's kind of similar topic, but yet very different. And we're going to talk about modifiers, program modifiers, or add-on things that are frequently used to enhance the pricing for things that might not be covered as a part of the normal product formulas and definitions. We'll look at what they are, how they're added, how they can enhance your estimating order entry, how you create a modifier and associate that modifier with one or more products. And then there's also a mechanism that some may elect to use, where you can have a modifier and actually use it in your order entry or your estimate entry, but would prefer not to have it be visible on an estimate or an order or a work order. So we'll walk through that process, and then we'll wrap up on Thursday with looking at some examples where you can see the same basic product in the same basic order that will employ different modifiers as we go along. Now, today's session and also Thursday's session, it's going to be necessary to do this with two different versions of the dataset, controlled dataset. One I refer to as version 2, and the other one is version 3. So you'll see me ping pong back and forth. I'll try to limit the number of times that I have to do that. I have both versions open. So in essence, we're going to cover, in some cases, we're going to cover the same topic twice, but it'll have to be done that way in order for you to see what it might look like in the version of the software that you're using versus what some of the others on the call might be using. So now I'm going to switch over to version 2, and I need to change the. Okay, everybody should be seeing control. So let's get started. Okay. So what are selection lists? Just very simply, selection lists have many different purposes in control. And selection lists provide a means of grouping things that are similar together in what control calls categories. Some of those groupings might be for different material types. Some of the groupings might be related more to equipment and labor. The focus of our discussion today is simply going to focus on the selection lists as they relate to materials and material categories. So I'm not going to make any reference at all, to any of the other types of categories that exist, and there are lots of them in the system. We won't go into any discussion on those. As I mentioned, there are some subtle differences between the different versions of the data set. What's important to note is that even though there may be some subtle differences, when you use a particular category or you use a part in that category, you'll see as we go through that they're going to be defined the same way. They're going to have the same attributes, but the results of what they produce may be very slightly different between the different versions of the data set. And that's not because of anything that's significant other than that some of the settings like multipliers or things like that, might be a little bit different. So the first obvious question that many of you might have is, well, how do I know what data set that I have? Well, I'll try to show you. The first thing I want to do is first make sure that you're aware of how you find out what version of control software, the executable program. So if you go up to help and then about control, and if you come down just to the second line here, over to the right, that is the version of the executable software that you're using. It has no relevance to our discussion today, but while we're here, I just simply wanted to show that to you. And that is the same for both versions of the data set, whether it's version V3 or V2. Now, the data set itself, you can find out what yours is by going to Setup and Pricing Setup and All Pricing. And then you're going to come over here to the left-hand column and choose User Constants. And depending on what data set you have, you're going to look for an entry labeled Universal Product Options. Or if you don't see that one, you're going to see one that is going to read Product Info. So if we look at this one and highlight it, then the data set version, about half a dozen or so lines down, 290 is what that is saying. So that says that the version of the data set that I am currently using is 2.9. Some of you may have 2.8, by 2.85, 2.69. So anything 2.9 and lower means that you're using what we refer to as the V2 data set. If you don't see the universal product options, but what you do see in lieu of that is the product info, then in the data set version, you're going to see something like 3.03 or 3.04. That means that you're using the V3 data set, okay? So just be aware that that's the subtle differences. Now I'm going to open up an estimate here. Number 5, I've got to look at my notes, it's 531. I'm going to open it up. There we go. And I'm going to edit it a little bit. I'm going to open this data set or this a particular estimate. And again, we're not going to talk about the particularly concern ourselves with the quantity or the height and the width or what printer or device you're using. We're going to focus our attention on, in this case, with the digital wide format prints, we're going to focus our attention on how we're using the material type and how we're using the material itself. Now, what you're going to see as we go through the session today, I have already added a category that I've called cork. Okay, so if we pull the list down and scroll up, these are all of the material type categories that currently are in this particular data set. Okay, and I've chosen cork. Then down here, once you've chosen the material type, let's just change that to paper. Now the next thing you choose is what kind of paper, a particular part in that paper category. So there are 2 of them in here. So if we go back to cork, I have already pre-added that material. Okay. Now, all of this is happening because there is a category that's been added, and we'll walk through the steps to do that, for the material type called cork. And that's going to use what is referred to as a dynamic link. So in the category that you create for cork or any other new material, you're going to put 1, 2, 10, 20 different parts conceivably in that category. So the dynamic link is a single reference to the category. And then when you choose that category as a material type, you're going to see all of the parts that may exist in the system that are in that category. So you can continuously add new material type or new materials to a category without having to maintain or update any kind of lists. Now, you can also, there could be parts that you're going to see that are going to be specific. Okay, you can't really visualize it here, but all these list things, you're going to hear me use the terminology of the dynamic link list, and you're going to hear me reference things called a master list. And those work together in making it easier for you to pull a part. Now, I'm going to stop with this one, and then we're going to come back to it. So I'm going to minimize this version. And now I'm going to go to version 3. Now we should be looking at the version 3 data set. Again, if we come up to pricing, all pricing, and look at user constants.
Paul, we can't see it. We're still on V2.
You are?
Yes.
You're seeing the estimate, right?
We're seeing the estimate for V2, yes.
Thank you. Now, what are you seeing?
We're still seeing the estimate for V2. Maybe if you minimize it.
I just did that.
Okay, now we're in V3.
Now you're in V3?
Yes.
Well, that's picky. I got to sometimes flip it backwards and come into it again. Just real quickly on the version. So if I went into setup and pricing, setup and all pricing, then choose user constants. And here's the product info that I alluded to. And if you see that, then you're in the V3. I just wanted to kind of back up and show you that. Now I'm going to open up a different estimate in here, and it's going to look different because of the different data sets. This one is number 545. And this is the digital print product. And here I chose, let me edit that here just a second. Okay, here I chose within the digital prints a process that I've chosen here that says I want to do a custom roll print, okay? It's just for illustration purposes. I'm not going to pay any attention to the height and the width and what printer I'm using, because I want to come down to the material. You can see here that I've added the category called cork, and inside that category, I've added one part called this cork natural tan stuff, okay? So now, there are some important concepts. Now I'm going to stay here on V3, and then we'll switch back to 2 in a second. There are some important concepts that are important, and it doesn't really make any difference which the context of whether it's the version 2 or the version 3 data set that we're talking about. A selection list may reference one or all of the following: one or more specific parts, one or more lists called dynamic links. And that dynamic link list may reference multiple individual parts. And then you can have a list that's a combination of a specific material part or specific parts, as well as, or in addition to, dynamic link lists. So there's different combinations of the that make up the list. Then a dynamic link that makes it easier to maintain your material list. If you're going to deactivate a particular part in a list or in a category, or you're going to add a part to a category with a dynamic link driving those, you don't have to update any of your lists in order to be able to choose and use that particular part that you may have added. Material parts have filters. And think in terms of filters as influencing how that particular part or how a part can be used, okay? The best way to illustrate that here is to go up to production and production information. And then I'm going to come over here to view parts by type. And I want to look at all the templates. And then I'm going to scroll out here to the right. And in this area here, I'm going to add something. I'm going to add I'm just going to add that one example to see it, okay? What this is a filter that I just added, and it happens to be for material parts. So as you look down the list, you see check marks, and then you see the absence of check marks. That is an indication or an instruction to control whether this particular acrylic part can be, in this case, directly printed to, okay? And if you see the absence of a check mark, that says that that first part, the 9x6 vinyl stickers, cannot be directly printed to, okay? So you can have filters that deal with cut vinyl. You can have filters that deal with direct printing, engraving, grand format, or the big wide, super wide printers, engraving, mounted to raw goods, reprographic, sandblast, and screen print. Okay, so there's a bunch of different filters. So if you could add successively these other filters out here to the side if you wanted to see them. So that's an important concept, because those filters help you indicate when you set up the product or set up the part, how it's going to be used, where it can be used. And then that, even though it's in the same category with others that may allow you to direct print to them, and others that don't allow you to direct print, they're in the same category, but with the filters, they won't, if they're not going to be permitted to direct print to them. If you're doing a digital print or a wide format print, and you choose that, you look at that category. If it's not eligible for the because of the filter, then you're not going to see it. So it helps maintain and not have awkward looking lists that you need to work through. Now, I am going to come back to, I'm going to minimize this one because I need to go back to 2. And went back to the agenda. Now, are you seeing the estimate again for the wide format prints, Linda? Linda?
Yes. Let me see.
Okay. You're
Yes,
looking at
we
that
are.
531,
Yes.
531 estimate. Okay, good. Thank you.
No, actually, we're on V3 still. Sorry. We're on the adjust part information screen. There we are. We're good.
Okay. All right. So let's get started on here. Now we're back in the data set. I'm going to cancel this because we don't need it open for a while. Close this. Now we're going to come up here. So now we're going to spend our time for the next few minutes setting up a category and then adding a part to that category. Okay. So this whole process starts with setup, pricing setup, and all pricing. Okay. Now over here, I'm going to come down to part setup. Okay. And again, the only one that we're going to focus on is material. So we're going to expand that list and let's widen it out so we can see it a little bit better. Now, what we're going to do here is I'm going to come down. I've expanded the materials list because that's where we want to focus. And then I'm going to come down and expand the list here. Bring that up so we can see it a little bit better. And then I want to add a roll material, okay? So I'm going to expand the roll stock, okay? Now, as we bring this up so we can see it, note that I've already cheated. I've already added the category, okay? Now, to create a category, what I would do is select the roll stock if that's where I want to add it. Or if I wanted to add one to flat stock, then I would have chosen it, okay? So here, now what do I want to do? Do I want to add a new part category or do I want to add a subcategory? Okay, I want to add the cork inside of this category. So I'm going to choose new subcategory. Okay. So here we're going to walk through these tabs, but just quickly note that it is already saying that this is going to be a category within this category called roll stock. Okay. So now we need to walk just quickly through what these different tabs mean. In a part category tab, the name is obvious. That's what you want to call it. So I would have chosen the word cork, okay? So let's do that. Now I'm not going to save this since I've already created it, but I want to walk through the process. You want to verify that you got the right subcategory that it's associated with, and you want to make sure that you're dealing with the material part. Very simple. In the material or in the accounting tab, really just verify that based on how you're using control, verify these the parameters for the tracking costs, whether you're tracking costs, whether you're accruing costs, whether you're tracking the inventory. That's not relevant to our discussion today, but just be aware that you might want to verify those tabs. I'm not going to look at the tags or the advanced. They're not relevant to our discussion. So after doing that, I would have simply said, save it, okay? Then that would have added the cork category. I'm going to cancel that because I've already added it, all right? So now we want to add a material, okay? Now you can add a material from scratch. You just start from bare bones from scratch, or you can find a similar part and clone it and then modify it. I'm lazy. I prefer to find one that's very similar and clone it and proceed in that manner, okay? So now we're back in the same category part setup over here, and we're in materials. We're back up, so you can see that we're in materials. We're in the material flat stock, and now we're in the roll stock. And now what we're going to do is we want to add a part within this particular category. And we'll stop short of actually saving it because I've already got one there. Now, my preference is to come down to one that's similar and just say, I want to start with this one, okay? So what I would do then is select that one that I want to use as my baseline and come over and say clone. And now you're ready to begin the process, okay? So here you would add the name of the part that you're adding. So I would have entered that cork natural tan 025 by 60 as my material. I would change the category to the cork that we already created. Oops, almost picked the wrong one. There we go. I would have picked cork. Change any of the description that you want here for the material, and verify, the material that you're adding material, and that's make sure that you are you select the correct items up here. Active meaning you want it to be able to be used, whether you want the default categories to be used, and whether you're tracking. By cloning, you're pretty much assured that these are going to be set, the way you want them to be set. Now, I'm going to go next to the Units tab. In these, if you're cloning one that's similar, it's likely that you really won't need to change the unit parameters. So in the inventory section here, these got the three sections: inventory, display, and additional. We're just going to quickly walk through. So the type of unit, you want it to be length, and the unit is going to be unit of measure. You want it to be feet or foot. Over here in the display, whether you're using the inventory, and then it's going to be length and foot again, and you probably won't have anything that's needed over in the additional units, okay? We go to the accounting tab. Again, here, it's likely that all you need to do is to verify these parameters, that they're okay. Then we're going to go to the cost tab, and here you want to enter the appropriate cost. So here you would enter the cost of the new material, and that would be 10.81 based on what I've already put in there, okay? And it's per foot, so it's a linear feet parameter. Then the other significant thing that you would need to verify is because material oftentimes has different multipliers. Some of them may use the default, some of them may use a custom multiplier. So here you want to make sure that you choose the appropriate multiplier for the new part that you're adding, okay? All right, now you need to choose how you're going to use that part, okay? So you're going to Hang on, I'm backing up to look at something here. Chances are, when you get into it by cloning an existing part and continuing with it, it's not likely that you're going to need to really change these parameters until you get out to the digital vinyl print and get into this one. This is where they're really referred to as filters, and it's these blue ones that I'm talking about. This says that I want this new part to be so that you can directly print to it. I want it to be able to be used for, I don't want it to be used for a grand format structure. I don't want it to be used for, for applying cut vinyl to it. And then if I would come out to the next one over here, same kind of thing, whether or not I want it to be used for screen printing. Obviously, the other thing that's really, really important when you're adding the new part, in addition to the cost and the multiplier and how it can be used, but also the dimensions, so to speak, of the material. Okay. And then when you're done, you would just simply say save. I'm going to cancel that because I've already got the cork part in here. And if we come back and look, these are the parameters. These are the costs. I left that at the 2. Let's change that to use the 3.5 and save it. And then coming out on the one that I already saved, I said it can be direct printed. I put in the dimensions of it. It's not relative to screen or cut vinyl, and it's not appropriate for screen printing. Okay. Now, here, if we go back up to the production, we're going to just spend a couple minutes on the talking a little bit more about the filters. You view parts by type, material, all of the templates. Now, if I come up to column chooser and do a right mouse click, go to column chooser, and I'm going to scroll down this list to substrates. Here we go. These are the ones that begin with the word substrate. These are the ones that are really in reality the filters, okay? So if we select that one and say add it and do these in bulk here in just a second. Do that one, do grand format. Let's just limit it to those 2, okay? Now it is going to add, it's thinking, now it's adding those 2 filters for direct printing and grand format. And as you can see, there are some that are checked yes and some that are checked no. Again, that is just a visual to kind of help you get a feel for where that particular item can be used. All right, now I am going to switch back to version 3. I'm going to go there and come back. Okay, Linda, are you seeing Explorer with estimate number 545?
No, we're still on version 2.
How are you seeing it?
No. Can you minimize it and then open it up again? Okay, now we're seeing V3.
Man alive, that is
Crazy.
career. Crazy. I'd minimized it twice. Okay, here I'm not going to repeat everything, but there are some subtle differences between V2 and V3, and that's what I'm going to try to focus on. We're going to begin by doing creating a part category. Okay, so we're going to do that by going up to setup, pricing setup, and all pricing. Okay, and then we're going to come over to part setup. And then in the middle or second column, we're going to expand materials. Now notice that the lists look quite a bit different than what we saw in the V2. We still have the materials. We eliminated one that was in here that doesn't exist anymore. So we can come right straight down, to the roll stock, okay? And this is one that I've already pre-added, the category and the part. So the process then to create in V3, the process is absolutely identical. The only difference is in the choosing of the primary category, the materials, and then choosing the category, and then creating the within that. So I would choose the roll stock substrate. I would come up and say I want to add a new subcategory. I would give that new subcategory a name, i.e. cork, verify that it's in the right subcategory, verify the material, come over here and verify the accounting stuff. And when I was done, then I would save it. That creates the category. Very, very identical process, slightly different look between the two versions. Now to create a part, the process again is, for all practical purposes, identical, but again, the differences are going to be in the structure of these categories in the subcategories. So if I'm going to create a part, I would probably come down to same kind of thing, where I would choose an existing one that's similar. I would say clone it, and now I'm going to verify that these settings up here are what I want. I'm going to put the new name in. I would change the category to the cork. Category that I had already created, verify the material, come on over to the units. The units here I want to spend a little bit more time on because they're a little different than so here I've set up so that the unit is going to be each. The unit is a roll. Over here in the display section, the length is the unit type of unit, length, and the unit is foot. Here I'm telling it that it is 150 feet in length. And over in the additional units, I'm saying each is one each equals 150 foot roll. And the length is 150 foot length is the roll. This facilitates so that when you're entering the cost of stuff, that you can enter the cost of the roll and not have to do that mental, not have to do that mental arithmetic yourself. Okay, So just some subtle differences between the data sets and how those units are used. Again, verify the accounting stuff, verify the cost stuff. I would put in the 1081, and I probably would have come down to here just and put in the 3.5. And now when you come out to this tab here doesn't exist in the other data set. So here you're saying that the width of this roll is 54 inches, the length is 150 feet, and here you're putting in parameters on the speed at which that material can be cut. Okay, so just some subtle differences in that regard. Now, when I'm done, I would have saved it. I've already done that, so I'm going to cancel. Similarly, I would come up to the production tab and go to adjust part information. I would view parts by type. I would say I want to see all of the templates. Here, again, we're focusing on the filters, okay? There's what I wanted to slide over. So if I come out here and do a right mouse click and say column chooser, these are the filters, okay? So I could choose direct print, say add it. I could choose let's just stop at that point. Here again, you're seeing the filters, okay? And then when you're done, you can just close that out. Okay. I'll tell you what, I'm going to ease the pain of flipping back. So I'm going to continue on with the V3. So I'm going to close this and close this. Now, we've added a part category, we've added a part, and now we have to set up the list, the selection list. So all of that preliminary stuff leads up to what really the topic of the day was, which is selection list. So I'm going to go to setup. I'm going to go to pricing, setup, and I'm going to go to all pricing. Now, you can create you're going to start this process by creating a dynamic link for that new category that you created. And just like the category or the part, you can start from scratch. My preference is to use a similar one and clone it and then modify it. So we're in we went to setup, pricing, setup, all pricing, and now we're going to come over to the left and we're going to choose selection lists. So I'm going to come down in the second column. We're focusing on materials today. So I'm going to widen this out, and we're focusing on roll material. Okay. So what I would have done here is, I don't want that one yet. I would have chosen a print vinyl as a guinea pig to start with, okay? So what I would have done, just instead of starting from scratch, I would have said, I want to take this one, I want to create it. So here I would have put in roll, corp, type is the new list that I want to create. And then I would verify these other settings, you know, keeping it the list sorted on all that stuff. And then I would have come down. This is a really important step. I would pull the downward arrow here, and I want to add what's called a dynamic link. Okay. So now I have to scroll down to find the category, part category for the dynamic link that I want to create. So I've chosen cork. Now, this is another critical step. Notice if I would save this as it exists, under the cork type dynamic list, there would have been references to print vinyl and to cork. So if you were to use this cork type in a digital print or in a product, you would have seen all of the parts in print vinyl and in cork. So to get rid of this one, I'm going to subtly highlight it. And then I want to come up here and say, I want to remove the row. Okay. So the row that you want to remove is the one that you cloned from. I'm going to say, I'm going to remove it, ask me to confirm it. And now I have taken care of the, I've got the new selection list type for cork. It's part of the roll material. I verify these parameters. I've changed the link. Now, we want to come in to use this thing called insert column. Okay. So to do that, I'm going to scroll out to the right here so we can see. I'm going to scroll out to the right, and I want to insert a column. But I want to choose the one that says add a filter. So I'm going to put in here direct, because I put print. I don't know if it's case sensitive, but I want to change that to a capital D. Now, if I say OK, now it is scroll out here again to the right. It's showing me the filter for direct print. Okay. And you could add other filters if you wanted to, if you're going to use it in grand format or screen printing or stuff like that. So with that, I've changed the type that I want, the category, verified it, put in the link, and added the filters, and then I would have saved it. I've already done that, so I'm not going to hit save. So now if I look at the here's the cork type that I saved. It's labeled cork. Now we have to update what I call the master list, okay? And the master list is going to be this one called roll material type. This represents a list of the categories when you choose a product like digital prints. When you choose a product and you go down to the material type, this is the list by name that you're going to see, okay? And the list that it's referencing, so this is the dynamic link to cork, this is the dynamic link to cut vinyls, and so on and so forth, down the line, okay? So here, what I would have done is simply edited this list. And then I would have come down to insert the row, this time just insert row. And then I would have added cork. is the text that I want to use. And then I would choose the little dot, dot, dot that you see there, okay? And then I would come down to materials and expand it. And then I would come down to roll material. And then I would choose the cork. And I would say, okay. And now it has associated this new entry with the dynamic link that I had just created for cork. Now, it's already there, so I'm not going to hit save. You can, if you have this checked here up at the top, this is always going to be kept in alphabetical order based on the text entry, so that you're going to see them appear in alphabetical order. So if we come back while we're here and look at the, got to keep track of time. If we come back and look at a estimate, go back up to 545 and edit it. Let's just put in 12. That's not 12. I don't want 12 feet. I want a foot by a foot. Printer, chosen the cork. This is the list of all of those ones that we just saw that were in that list that I called the master list. And this is the one that we added. And then we can come down to choose the part itself. Okay. Now if we had done other products, screen print, if we choose, I'm just trying to choose one here where we're not going to see it, okay? Say that we want to do a 4 by 8. If we come down to the material types, notice that this one is zeroed in on this particular category that's already predefined. And obviously, we're not going to see the material, okay? We come up here again and choose flat stock. To keep it the same, we're not going to see the cork entry because it was only associated with that one list. Now we can go back to V2 and kind of repeat this. I don't really think that it warrants doing that. It is so similar. Let me just comment on in the interest of time, let me just comment on the differences that for those of you that are V2 users, when you're creating the dynamic link, the process, I repeat, is the same, okay? But what you're going to do that's slightly different is that you're going to choose the selection list. Let's close out of this. Just use this as a vehicle to, and then I'll comment on the differences. Okay, so selection list, you're going to create the dynamic link. The process to get here to do it is identical. You're going to have the same reference to the materials. You're going to have to dig a little bit deeper because of the structure in the V2 database. Ultimately, you're going to want this one that's called roll material. That's the only difference, is the process of getting to it is slightly different. You're going to add the dynamic links in exactly the same way. You're going to add the filters in essentially the same way. You're going to update the master list in exactly the same way. The only difference is that you're going to get to it slightly different between the two databases, but it's going to look exactly the same way. Okay. Now, one thing that I did not do was that if you have a favorite set of materials that you use, you can create a kind of a unique category that would be my favorites, for example. And inside that my favorites, you could have had one or more dynamic links to specific categories. And then in addition to that, or in lieu of one of those dynamic links, you could have had in the reference to specific parts. And you would do that and put in an entry in here. And then you would come out to the, I got the wrong one here, just a second. You would come out to the, in here, and you would choose the part that you want, the actual part that you want. I don't see that very often, but I've seen some where they have wanted to customize and create a my favorites. I call it a my favorites. We're just a couple minutes before 11. I apologize for not having stopped for questions, but let's open it up for just any question for any of the for either of the data sets. Any questions?
I don't see any questions at this time, Paul.
All right. Well, Thursday, we're going to focus on modifiers, just a kind of a where we're going to look at modifiers in the different data sets is slightly different. Here they're called options. These are modifiers. E2 database, they're the same modifiers. They'll work the same way, but you're going to see them in a slightly different manner. So we're going to talk about creating 3 different ones, how they work, how you associate them with products, and then how you can make a decision on if or how you want those to be visibly evident on estimates and work orders. Take care, everybody. Hope this was a helpful session for you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul.